We'll be getting started here in just a couple minutes. Waiting for a technical issue. I am Lisa Eckert. I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies and Research, and I'm so happy to welcome you here to the Faculty Buzz Session. The Faculty Buzz Session is one of our favorite events. You'll hear me say that again at 3MT, just so you know the 3-minute thesis today. But we are here to welcome our faculty members. They will be giving you a brief overview of the research that they do. There will be time for questions afterwards. If you ask a question, please get one of the mics. Someone will bring it to you and speak into the mic so we can hear the question, so the whole audience can hear you. We'll be wrapping this up with a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Rick Mengen. And before you leave, make sure you pick up a raffle ticket and put it in the basket that is at the registration desk. So if for every event you attend during Peak 25, you get a ticket to put into the raffle and you will win something, hopefully. More events you attend, the better your chances are at the event later this evening. So I'd like to begin by introducing you and welcoming Provost Anne Dahlman, who is here to also welcome you and to say a few words about research here at Northern. So Provost Dahlman.
Good morning, everyone. I apologize for my snow boots. I walk everywhere, so they are not nice high heels like yours. But welcome, everyone, to the the Faculty Buzz Session. You will hear the latest research on a wide variety of topics. I'm so excited to be part of a campus where we have amazing faculty doing internationally renowned research. So you are at the front seat of being able to witness that. So thank you, whether you're a student, community member, staff, or faculty, for coming to learn, but also support our presenters. And if you're presenting, thank you for taking the time to share your research and learning. And I look forward to, watching some of them myself today. Thank you so much for being here. And enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Provost Dahlman. I'd also like to thank the organizers of this event. This is our first collaboration, or our first in-depth collaboration with Innovate Marquette. And that's been a pleasure. It's been nice to get to know them a little bit better and to also highlight the fact that research, innovations in research, scholarly activity, and creative endeavors that are undertaken by the faculty here at Northern also contribute to the economic development of the region. Northern offers so much to the community, and some of what you're going to see today is just a bit of what it is that happens here on a daily basis. So, first, our first presenter. Are we advancing the slide? There we go. Oh, I'm sorry. The Anishinaabe, I'd like to do the land acknowledgement. Northern Michigan University is located on the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy, an honored alliance of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. Before this land was called Marquette, it was known as Gitchinabibi Zibing, and I'm not sure I said the last word correctly, so please forgive me if I didn't. Thank you. And here is our team, the Graduate Studies and Research team, and we are the administrative support structure for graduate students, graduate programs, and research at Northern. We have undergraduate research programs. I'm moving quickly so that we stay on task. Office of Sponsored Programs. Tess is back there. Enrico. There's Tess. And what is a buzz session? This is a small, informal group discussion. Faculty will share their research. They get 3 slides, 5 minutes, think of your questions while they're talking, because they will be here to answer them for you, and we'll enjoy some conversation. So this is informal. This won't be a talk per se, but a chance really to engage and question and learn. So our presenters, as you see, Dr. Adam Preuss, Dr. Jong-Yun Yu, Dr. Sal Ryman, Dr. Jill Grunstrom, and Dr. Evan Pratt. That is a lineup, and you can see that it really is representative of the different disciplines and the different ideas that you're going to hear about today. So first, may I please introduce to you, and you will give a big welcome to Dr. Adam Preuss from the Department of Psychology. He is the department chair, and here to share his work with us.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to this and to share some of the research that we've been doing in my laboratory. I guess I could have called this the gabapentin buzz. I didn't think I wasn't clever enough to come up with that when I was seeing this lineup. So a little bit about gabapentin. I think a lot of people have probably heard about it. It's becoming a pretty well-known compound. The trade name is, our brand name is Neurontin. It's used for a lot of things, but it's been increasingly used for pain management and as an alternative to maybe when opioids might be prescribed for pain. And the concern there, of course, is with the opioid epidemic. If we can have pain management while avoiding drugs that could have abuse potential, that would be really ideal to help kind of reduce the risk of dependence on opioids. So it's really been increasing in usage. And in addition to treating pain, it's also been used for anxiety. We're seeing this a lot more for treatment for anxiety. Occasionally even for treating drug withdrawal for substances like opioids or alcohol. So for a variety of reasons, it's kind of hard to see the chart, but over the past, this is a study looked at the past 20 years, seen a really big increase in gabapentin prescriptions. I got some complicated neuroscience on there, but the gist is that the way that gabapentin works, it tends to have a reduction in neurotransmission in neurons, and so in that way maybe there's a depressant effect, but despite its name, it doesn't seem to work on the neurotransmitter GABA, which is a classic transmitter that's affected by things like benzodiazepine, sedatives, or alcohol, or even like your major tranquilizers like barbiturates. It doesn't work on the same receptors despite its name, but it works maybe in a different way. So, everything popped up. So I meant to have those things spring up on top of the image. But what I was going to show here is a recent study we published last year, and I want to note that it was conducted in my lab, so everybody that was involved in the study were current NMU students at the time the study was conducted, as we were carrying out. It took a few years to run the experiments. It was published last year, and it was in the journal that was an American Psychological Association publication. It was actually noted by the editor as having important significance, and was a featured article in that issue. So we're definitely onto a topic that is a growing concern potentially, and that's learning a little bit about how the drug effects might feel like, and we're starting to see increased reports of recreational effects with these compounds. In fact, there was a story, if I had more slides, I would have showed it from TV6. A few days ago, there was an arrest, and they had full of recreational substances on them. One of them was actually gabapentin. So we're starting to see more reports about this. So the study we conducted was to ask, can we learn something about what those effects are, and can we learn something about the pharmacological basis for it? So we conducted a study called drug discrimination. It's a pretty technical behavioral procedure that basically we asked, can animals learn to tell us when they're actually on the effects? And they actually feel like they're on the effects of the drug, and what they feel, which we would call subjective effects, so they feel noticeably different from something else. And so the way we do this is you put them in an operant chamber, we train them to respond for food reward, but the choice of which lever will result in food that day is dependent upon if they feel the effects of gabapentin or not. And if you play that video, it just shows, never seen a rat in an operant chamber before. That's what it looks like. Rats working for food, but it's pressing that lever because that day it either got gabapentin and it feels the effects, and that's the one. Or on different days, they'll get like a placebo, and they'll press the opposite lever. So they can, over time, they've shown us, and I hope I can very carefully hit the pointer, that over time they got very good at telling us when they were very accurate at detecting if they were given gabapentin, or very accurate telling us they got the saline. So they actually learned to tell the difference. So this tells us that the subjective effects can be robust, and you can actually feel different on the compound. Now, the next question we asked was, okay, what might it feel like? And so once you have these animals trained, you can test different compounds. So what we have on here is one drug we tested is called pregabalin, which is a drug that's kind of in the same pharmacological class as gabapentin, and sure enough, when the rats were tested with this and they received a high enough dose, they're responding on the gabapentin lever just as much as when they get gabapentin. In other words, they can't tell the difference. What was kind of interesting is we also went on and tested a variety of compounds. I'm only highlighting a couple of findings here, but one of them was diazepam, which is a well-known benzodiazepine. Another one is also a barbiturate, like a major tranquilizer. Both of these compounds also fully substituted for gabapentin in these animals. All three of these compounds are controlled substances. And so we were the first to show that you could evaluate the subjective effects of gabapentin in this model. We're also the first to show that it has some similarity to well-established drug effects that do have some depressant effects and can be challenging as recreational substances. And this is part of the growing literature to open the door about the challenges that we might be seeing as gabapentin prescriptions increase, that we might start seeing an increase in people having a problematic, challenging use with these drugs. That's my presentation. Thank you. Questions? Happy to entertain any questions. This is kind of a rapid fire presentation. Oh yes, it's a hand. Can't see you, I can hear you. Yeah, that was that first slide. I only had a few minutes, but it's more technically, it acts on a type of calcium channel that rests on the axonal terminals of neurons in the brain. Calcium influx is critical for the release of neurotransmitters, and when gabapentin binds to the calcium channels, it actually inhibits calcium influx and reduces how much neurotransmitter is released. So it has a suppressive effect on the activity of neurons and messaging. We find similar things that can occur by depressant drugs like diazepam and barbiturates. That works a little bit differently, but the net result is they also have a suppression in activity. Some of the questions down the line will be understanding what is the mechanistic connection, but what I mentioned would be a first step in trying to understand where the connection is. Yep. Good question. Need a baseball cap up here.
Is the only application systemic, or can you actually do it to a pain point?
It's a good question. So the drug was given systemically, so it was in a way that would mimic taking the drug orally. And it's only administered orally, I believe. And so I'm not aware of any like where they do like a I'm trying to think of the word, into CSF administration or anything like that. I'm not aware of them using the drug in that way. I think it's only used orally. So it does go everywhere systemically. It's a good question.
Is there anything that occurs naturally in foods or anything that has the same suppression effects?
Probably not that I'm aware of. I got my mind going down trails of foods that can kind of make us groggy and things like that. But if I can't put my finger on one specifically, that'd be like a gabapentin type effect. Good question. Yes, Yeah, we actually administer it intraperitoneally, which mimics the effects orally because it's put into the intraperitoneal region, which gets absorbed by the portal vein to deliver like food stuff. There's nothing in the syringe or the solution makeup that would help the animal differentiate. If it was oral, that would be a concern. You'd have to try to do something to mask the flavor. So that's actually a pretty astute point. So, yeah, good question. Let me step off. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Down the end. All right, cool.
Thank you, Dr. Proust. Good questions. I'm right back here. I didn't leave. But I also didn't want to just stand up here. So next we have on deck Dr. Yu from the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. And if I can invite Dr. Yu to the podium.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Jong In, and my students often call me Dr. Yu. So if you want to remember me, and as many of you agree that the superior teaching is the Northern's pride, and we are so proud to provide the superior teaching. And then the reason, some of the reason behind that superior teaching is, I believe, the robust research we are doing. And then I would like to share some of my research on generative AI and water cybersecurity. And then also one of the reason I would like to present this research is not to show off myself, but also I wanted to let you aware of that how generative AI and cybersecurity is impacting our public administration, American government, I'm teaching, but also in our higher education. So I will keep my presentation as short as possible so that I can have a little bit more time for question. And as you can see that I presented about the generative AI in several venues, and this is just one of the examples. The north wind, maybe some of you may know that we are so proud to have the north wind as our student-led newspaper, in addition to our awesome Christy and then our media team. They are fantastic. And then you can see that the name, AI ate my homework. And then you can imagine that, wow, yes, generative AI is eating our homework. And then I presented that workshop titled Smarter, Not Harder, Using AI in College Without Crossing the Line. And Deanna and I presented about what generative AI, and then how can we use the generative AI in higher education, in our classroom, and even I will tell a little bit more about also what Northern is doing the campus-wide about this, but also like for the students and then also parents and then community members. Generative AI is impacting our learning a lot, significantly, but also we are aware that some people may very concerned about that, but also we are proactively approaching how we can use generative AI to help our Northern students better, so that we can take advantage of this technology while we make sure their learning does not harmed by anything. Definitely there are some challenges needed to be resolved, like a privacy issue and a biases issue, but also Northern created a NMU AI literacy work group and under the academic affairs, and we so much appreciate all the public higher education administrators, so they are doing fantastic job leading this. And then for the last 2 years, we have achieved so many things, and this is just one of the resources that we created, so that it's available. If you search the NMU AI literacy, you can see that this is the web page is the most efficient way to understand generative AI, as well as the specific application. And also, I point out that one thing, like AI ethics, I'm also teaching technology and ethics and Jacobetti complex, so that students can be aware of how to use the generative AI in higher education. And Also, this is one of my research agenda I'm conducting. Fingers crossed, depending on the faculty research grant approval, I would like to expand my research Michigan-wide so that I can have a better understanding to understand the other higher education institutions, but also how we can develop the better generative AI policy. And second thing, I would like to point to you out that you may know that the Northern Michigan Environmental Conference and Workshop is approaching. It will happen in mid-March. It is not as good as Peak 25. I know. Bill is over there. Peak 25 is the best. We cannot beat that. But one of the sessions is the Cyber Incident Response Workshop. And then I had the opportunity to co-organize with this event, targeting for the water utilities in this region. You can see the CISA, and I also working with the Michigan Department of Michigan State government, including Michigan State Police, so that we are willing to leverage our research, the cutting-edge research to not only just for the publication purpose to share widely in the scholarly academic community, but also how we could leverage our research to our teaching, student learning, but also how we can help better those people Northern Michigan University is existing for. As a promise, I keep my lecture short so that I would like to welcome your question. Thank you.
If you have questions, please wait for a microphone because we have a live stream, and if you're not speaking in the microphone, they won't hear you. So thank you for waiting for that.
If you don't mind, start with your name and then so that we can know you.
Check. Okay, there it is. Okay. My name is Mike Golat. I'm actually a city manager, so this is right up my alley here. So what are the biggest threats that you're seeing to water system security, and how is your research helping to mitigate those threats?
Thank you, Michael. And so your question is the biggest challenges of cybersecurity?
No, the biggest threats to water system security.
So I mean, so are you focusing on the like a local government or just in general?
Yeah, any municipal water system.
Just focusing on the municipal water.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Because each, like as you can imagine, it's so extensive, so that I wanted to focus on. First of all, thank you, Michael, for your role as a city manager, as an instructor teaching public administration. I really appreciate your work as a city manager. And then there are definitely many security challenges, and then one thing that my research is helping that is like this. This is an example. Recently, EPA, as you may know, EPA is the federal agency in charge of many environmental areas, including water. And then they recently tried to employ a new policy that require most of water utilities have to have a cybersecurity some report, and then including myself, and then some of the scholars raised the awareness about that. Even though we need some more advanced policy in addressing those municipal water utilities, and then I published in several areas, including IBM Center. But as a scholar who are researching doing this, that we also know we have to understand the capacity, the available budget, available staff of municipal water utilities. So that including myself and then many other scholars worked with the nationwide water organizations, and then we succeed to convince EPA that we have to wait, because if we just require the municipal water utilities to report cybersecurity standards without the currently available resource, then they cannot provide that. So this is the one of the examples that we could use our research to convince the federal agency, even though while we respect their hard work of the EPA, but also we can convince them that see the reality of municipal water utilities so that we can balance between the efficiency but also social equity issues. Thank you again, Michael.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Blair. I'm from the Robert Bosch Corporation. The topic of technology and ethics, specifically Gen AI and ethics, is at the forefront. I'm curious from your standpoint, what is the key question we should be asking ourselves in the business context, whether we're startup founders or large corporations?
So your question is that, are you asking a certain approach in technology and ethics in the business context?
In the business context, yes. What questions should we be asking ourselves?
So then, thank you for the question. And then before, given the limited time, I did not introduce myself. So before returning to academia, I worked for the industry for a while. I worked for the engineering consulting company, so that like I went to Saudi, Kuwait, UAE, Myanmar, and so I have extensive business development and business context. I think one of the questions that business should think about is, does it make money or not? Does it make a profit or not? Because maybe you think that, why? In technology ethics, we have to ask ethical question, right? But if business do not make a profit with this platform, then we cannot survive. So in thinking of the sustainability and then in thinking of the long term, I believe that whenever, like cybersecurity, there are so many cybersecurity companies and there are so many generative AI platforms such as, the ChatGPT and Gemini and many others. In addition, there are so many startups using generative AI. They produce a product, but I believe thinking about technology and ethics are important, but even in that sense, really business has to think about that, does it make a profit or not? Or if adding some more element, that may strengthen the ethical question, but if it will end up the loss and the significant loss, and then it can make the sustainable, I believe that component should be reconsidered. So that the making a profit is I believe, the one of the key questions, even when we approach technology and ethics. Thank you.
And this will be our last question.
Hi, Dr. Yu. My name is Roy Atkinson. I'm also a local government administrator. So I have a question right now. There's a lot of questions about data security, and it also correlates to ethics. But how safe is the data that we're inputting on these generators, such as OpenAI, Copilot? Just how safe is it? And is it secure from being sold? Like, there's not a lot that's come out about it, but I mean, a lot of people have adopted it.
Thank you, Joey. So I have to be honest, Joey. How safe the data depending on who can answer the question. That means that if you ask ChatGPT or Gemini, they will answer like this: yes, very safe, no worries, you're okay, don't worry. But if you are asking the question of a professor who is doing technology and ethics like me, whatever you upload to ChatGPT, it will be sold in 10 years. It's not just for fun, but I wanted to make some distinction, because even the data security and the data transparency or our privacy is so important, but also we need to understand the difference between government and business sector. As some of my students know that very clearly, government are allowed to do anything if that is written in law. And if that is not written in law, they cannot do. But business sector, they can do everything unless they are prohibited by law. That means that while ChatGPT has to abide by certain federal requirements, including data privacy, but that law should have shortfall for many reasons. And we understand that because the Congress cannot change law every 2 or 3 years. It takes time. So because of that, the time differences, like thus loss of data can be happening. That's why I mentioned that even though they can protect our data whenever we input in the prompt engineering or the ChatGPT, right now it's definitely safe. But yeah, we also needed to recognize that it can be solved in like 10 years because the federal government cannot control about that. Thank you.
Go sit down, Dr. Yu. Sorry. I am thrilled now to introduce Dr. Sal Ryman from the Department of Social Work.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sal, as ever my students call me, or just Sal, either one. I'm junior faculty. I just started this year. I think I'm the newest on the panel, but so I'm kind of in a transition stage in my research. Whoops. So I'm finishing up from my dissertation work, dissemination of the findings. My focus was on the on-campus healthcare experiences of trans and non-binary students at HBCUs. That's historically black colleges and universities. I did my PhD at North Carolina A&T, which is an HBCU. And so being part of that community, wanted to look at the experience of students. This was a qualitative study using descriptive phenomenology. My question was, what is the lived experience of trans, non-binary, and gender-expansive HBCU students with accessing and utilizing on-campus physical and mental health services? I interviewed 18 students at 9 of the 10 undergraduate HBCUs in North Carolina. There was a real mix of positive and negative experiences, both with the general campus context as well as within physical and mental health care services. There was a lot of misgendering, experiences of racism, which was really disturbing to find that black students were experiencing anti-black racism within the black university environment. But the HBCU is a microcosm of the larger world, and there are faculty and staff of all races working there, so racism is still a problem. The findings kind of fell into 4 general themes. One about discrimination, which again, racism, misgendering, anti-LGBTQ discrimination of all types, a desire by students for trust and respect from healthcare providers. They didn't always feel particularly respected. A sense of both invisibility and visibility. So invisibility being powerless as black trans students, but also hypervisibility, particularly when they went off campus for services, being black and trans in North Carolina. And then finally, a desire for care concordance, which is pretty common in the healthcare field in general. People want someone that's similar to them, but we had students specifically say, if I had someone who was black and trans like me, I would go and get services more often, which was really good to note because the trans population in general, and particularly trans people of color, have lower utilization of healthcare for a wide range of reasons. So I'm in the stage of disseminating this. The big part for me is actually communicating with university administration to improve policies for gender-affirming care and gender-affirming admissions at universities. I'm just getting started with some colleagues at the University of Michigan on some research regarding gender refugees, which is a term we've coined to describe individuals and families who travel to access gender-affirming care because of state-level bans. So we are looking at travel of families to access care for their youth. Some of my colleagues have been working for a while on qualitative work, and they're now in the process of coding data. I'm finishing up a large-scale survey to assess more broadly how far people are traveling. Are they just traveling for care, or are they actually relocating? What are the financial and emotional impacts on families? Like, there's the cost of moving or cost of travel, but there's also, it's a huge stressor on families to deal with this. What are the hardships? And right now, with the current political climate, I'm actually adding more questions to this survey to sort of assess what people were doing prior to Trump's executive orders on sex being biological male or female, and no recognition of gender identity, and NIH freezes, which we have the temporary restraining orders, but there are a lot of facilities that have just stopped providing care right now because they're uncertain of their legal ability to do so. Potentially a big change in the direction of this research. So we'll see how that goes. And then the work I'm getting ready to start is looking at how menopause impacts non-binary and trans masculine people assigned female at birth. Nobody's looking at this. I'm starting out with a scoping review, and Lynn Lambden from our library services has signed on to be my co-PI for the scoping review. I'm very excited. And then I want to do a qualitative, like a pilot level qualitative study, talk to some people to inform more ongoing research. There's very limited research about menopause in trans people because of this assumption that people have fully transitioned, and so they don't go through a natural quote unquote natural biological process of menopause. And that's really it. Thank you. Questions?
I'm wondering, this is your research. Have you had many partners along the way? Have you worked with students along the way as well? This being some of your student work, but.
Sure, so so far working with students has only been as my participants because of the need for my dissertation work to be independent. I've been looking at finding some funding to maybe have some students help me over the summer with some data collection work because I'm very much interested in engaging students in doing mixed methods research. And there's I see a lot of students in social work and across campus who are interested in the issues that I'm looking at. I need a McNair next year. Just putting that out there.
When you're talking about disseminating the information about on-campus care,
sure.
With public universities and the implications of the recent executive orders, has that been obviously difficult, but how has the response sort of been from these public institutions for how to improve this healthcare, but also in the context of these new executive orders?
Yeah, so right now I'm putting together my outreach materials for universities, so I don't have any feedback yet. I can say I have seen, since the executive orders, universities removing mission statements, departments like social work removing mission statements, removing pronouns from faculty bios and stuff. and it makes me very nervous. It was already a difficult issue. Working in North Carolina where I was, they have banned gender affirming care for minors, and the initial desire was for anyone 21 and under, which would have impacted the students that I was working with. It passed for under 18 only, but you know, it's interesting, some of the schools, while I was doing this, I was also looking at policies at schools, and some are very inclusive spaces. They have multicultural centers or gender and sexuality resource centers and stuff. They have staff in the counseling centers who are trained, and even one school, I spoke to a student who had a trans man as a therapist at their university, which was awesome. But other schools, like, they don't even cover it in their non-discrimination policy, right? Much less anything else. So at A&T where I was, you could register with your preferred name. You could have your pronouns acknowledged and stuff at the registrar's office. So like when your list, as professors, when we got our list of students, like we knew people's preferred name and stuff. And other schools don't even talk about it. And part of that is it's a mix of public schools and private schools. Generally, the public schools were more open. A lot of the private HBCUs are religious-based, and so it's a totally different environment there. But yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, there are ways for schools to provide affirming care and be open and welcoming without violating any executive orders or state or federal laws. Just being kind is a great place to start. Ooh, Erin.
Hi, Sal.
Hi.
So my question related to how do you think these executive orders are going to impact the families that are relocating, especially as states start to possibly implement policies that kind of diminish the amount they can receive services? Like, where do you think these people will be able to go?
Yeah, I don't know that traveling and relocating is going to continue to help necessarily. Just yesterday, HHS Secretary Kennedy announced that Health and Human Services is now following the executive order that there's no such thing as gender, there's just biological sex of male and female, which aside from the scientific inaccuracy of that, also just denies the existence of a lot of people. And, you know, I don't know, I'm still here. I didn't magically disappear. But yeah, that's why I want to put some additional questions into my survey that I hope to be able to launch by summer. But I don't know, I'm curious to see some of the qualitative data that the other team members are collecting. I've not been involved in that because I haven't had the capacity. But I know they are in the process of coding interviews, and so seeing their initial feedback is going to be really interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dr. Jill Brunstrom from the Department of Theater and Dance. This is a very familiar welcome space for you. For some of us, like me, we're not up here very often.
Except I've never used a clicker on this stage, so this is going to be a little new and different. So hi, I'm Jill. My research is focused on the rehabilitation experiences of pre-professional collegiate dancers following, there we go, their dance-related injuries and the impacts of these experiences on their education and on their future careers. So I've included for you how I'm defining both of these terms because I think that's pretty important for you to understand. So I have recently conducted a pilot study, and I'm in the throes of my dissertation research So on top of my work here as a professor, I am also a doctoral candidate at Columbia University in New York City. So why dance injuries? Sports medicine is recognized as a specialty, and dance medicine kind of falls as a subset unofficially underneath that, but we do have our own international association and a scholarly journal. And what the literature tells us is that injury among dancers has a lifetime incidence of 90%, and that most of these injuries fall in the lower extremities, and unfortunately and historically, dancers are scared to report these injuries because they affect jobs. In our world, dancers are afraid that they will affect acceptance into their program, they will affect grades, they will affect their social standing. They're afraid that if they go to a medical professional, they will simply be told not to dance. Because oftentimes in our world, what we do is looked at as a hobby or as an extracurricular activity and not necessarily as a career track. So I conducted a pilot study last spring that had elements of quantitative and qualitative questions looking at the same population. And what I found out was that chronic injuries really predominated over acute injuries, and that the dancers reported that their injuries highly impacted not only their dance training, but also their life outside of dance, which highlighted challenges such as missed opportunities, physical limitations, and mental health struggles. And so because this pilot study gave them the opportunity to include their thoughts rather than just answering multiple choice questions and statistical information, this was really a unique study. 91% of the respondents sought medical evaluation, and 80% of the respondents pursued rehabilitation. And they reported that experiences with the healthcare professionals varied, emphasizing that there is a need for more dance-specific knowledge in the medical field and better communication between the medical professionals and the dancers. So now, moving forward, my dissertation research will expand on this work. So I'm currently conducting narrative research with pre-professional collegiate dancers in New York City and, strangely enough, in Arizona, who are in the throes of injury rehabilitation. So I'll have 3 interviews with each of them to understand their background and history, their injury onset and diagnosis, which seems to be elusive in our world sometimes, their rehabilitation process, and then hopefully their return to dance. A lot of this information is completely absent in the research canon for us. So in essence, what I'm trying to understand is their full experience in their own words and from their own perspective. So one thing that this research has had me questioning is what kind of baseline testing do we have to know when a dancer is ready to be back in training and or in performance? So as noted in that pilot study research, not all medical professionals have this dance background, and so this can be kind of a relative question because our art form has this athletic baseline, but there's also an aesthetic layer on top of it. So this led me to find the Dance Ready score, which was created by 2 doctors of physical therapy, both of whom were formerly dancers, and one who is the clinic physical therapist for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, which is housed in New York City. So this system is a program that essentially provides a baseline fitness level for dancers. So it's something that could be implemented at the top of a training season or as a dancer is returning to function post-injury. It gives us information on strengths that the dancers maybe need to build upon, vulnerabilities that may lead to injury, and insights into the dancer's individual performance capacity. So it functions kind of like a functional movement screen for those of you who might know what that is. There are 11 stations, and the stations are more dance specific than some of the screens that are out there at the moment, similar to a functional movement screen. So it's looking at cardiorespiratory fitness, jump testing, balance, strength, external rotation, which is something that's really important for what we do. Again, that aesthetic component. So one thing that is obviously important to this is the dancers are going through physically the stations, so it gives them a self-awareness of their physical ability, number one. So as they go through each of the stations, there is a person who is running the station who is either timing or inputting a score into a computer system that begins a calculation on the back end. And the two DPTs who have created this system have done an extensive amount of work on the back end using a lot of scholarly information from other tests and from journal publications to create the back end system for this. What's really unique about it, as opposed to some of the other screens, is that the information is reported in score form rather than being reported in medical terminology. So this means that it's also really accessible to dancers who maybe don't have a full medical degree in their back pocket. So it also allows us then, as the dance professionals and people who have a medical background, so I actually started my education here at Northern in pre-med, so I'm lucky enough to have some of that, so I'm able to kind of walk through that with my dancers, so I feel fortunate about that, but not everybody has that. So I will be one of the trainers in this system. I had the amazing opportunity to travel to New York last month and see this in action with the pre-professional students at the Alvin Ailey School and watch their students go through each of the 11 stations and see how this whole thing works and see how the back end works and watch the physical therapists go through the information with the students then, which was really great. So I am just about done with my training on the system, and we will implement this with our dancers actually this spring instead of this fall because they released the training a bit early. So we will use this with our dance majors as well as with our musical theater majors to help them hopefully have a better understanding of their physical selves when they perform on this stage, and hopefully mitigate some injuries and help our visits to the Injury Evaluation and Care Clinic, even though we are probably their best customers. Job security, right? And that's it. Thank you.
Do you guys have dancers do the test as like a baseline, almost like a concussion protocol test to say, when you're completely healthy, here's where you score on these 7 exercises, or was it 11 exercises, and then when they get an injury, retest so you can see the difference?
So we haven't implemented this yet here, but what the plan will be is that they will, next year when we have freshmen incoming, that they would do this at the very top of the semester so we would know what they're coming in at. Now, we cannot control what they're coming in with, so it would just give us a baseline of where they're coming into us. So the plan is that they would do it at the beginning of their freshman year as well as at the end of their freshman year. So they also have a plan of, these are maybe the things that I need to work on over the summer before I come back into the full world of what we do here, which is pretty intense. And then they would do it 2 more times throughout their time with us so that they would run through this test 4 times in their 4 years with us, is the plan.
So it sounds like with the tendency to try to like just work through an injury to keep yourself marketable later on, that sounds like it has a lot of parallels in the professional sports world. Is there any kind of like collaborations or anything like that that you're looking at in how that industry deals with it too?
There are some, that's a really great question, so also thank you both for the questions. There are some. We are just such a small market at the moment. Dance medicine didn't really even become a thing until the 80s. So we're like the new kid on the block. We're not as widely accepted. Certainly television shows like So You Think You Can Dance and now the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders are really helping our street cred. But the aesthetics of what we do are a layer that a lot of athletics don't have on top of it because it doesn't really matter what you look like when you kick the soccer ball or when you make the basket. So There are some parallels that we can draw, but because we have this aesthetic component that we have to look a very particular way when we do what we do, that is something on top of the science and the data that changes a lot of the things. And because a lot of people don't have that information, it makes it a little bit trickier because they don't understand that component. Does that help answer that?
Yeah, I think it's on. There. I too deal with doctors who don't know about my patients. So I'm wondering what would you like to see change in like medical education to prepare doctors to respond to dance injuries?
That is a great question, and I think there are actually some people that are starting to make inroads here. So there's a great physical therapist. She's actually the physical therapist for Tisch at NYU, and she has started a company called the Dance Medicine Education Initiative. And it's like an extra training program that you can go through that helps with, I think, speaking the canon of medical knowledge and medical terminology, so it keeps it in their world, and it helps with awareness and making the connection points. And I think something that has gone a long way with some of the physicians that I'm currently working with is them asking a lot of questions of, because dancers tend to know their body very, very well, of like goals that we have or what we need to get back to, and starting conversations. And then really listening seems to be really helpful. And it turns out that once you let a dancer talk, which we don't get to do very often, as it turns out, I did have a ballet teacher once that told me dancers should be seen and not heard, which was a really magical moment. That once you let us talk, we will describe something eventually long enough that they will figure out the problem. And we're lucky enough in town, if there are any dancers in the room, Dr. Brian Dixon is a saint. And he listened long enough to help figure out a problem that lasted a long time. And so I think just some of those tools can be really helpful, although I also understand that oftentimes we're going to the medical community looking for answers, and they feel this obligation to always have the answers, and that's not always the easiest thing.
I think we have time for one more question. Do we have any? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and now I would like to invite to the podium Dr. Evan Pratt from the Department of Chemistry.
Thanks, Lisa. Is this good? Okay. Somehow I'm nervous right now, even though I teach all day, just in front of a new group. So, so my name is Evan Pratt. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry here at NMU. It's going on my 5th year now, so I'm still considered I think an early stage investigator. So some of the research projects we do in my department are I would still consider to be in the early stages, but my department and in the college as a whole has been really supportive, and I've built some really good collaborations with the project I'm going to talk about today is with the Upper Michigan Brain Tumor Center, but I have other collaborations, for example, with Adam over here on a interdisciplinary project looking at, between the departments of psychology and chemistry. So I just wanted to note that for a second. I'm just choosing one project to discuss today. So, so the title of my talk is Illuminating the IDH mutant-associated oncometabolite. And we call that oncometabolite D2HG. It's an acronym. I'll tell you what the acronym stands for in a second. And we do this in human glioma cells, so brain cancer cells, using a novel fluorescent biosensor. I realize now that's a lot to digest. So the term oncometabolite refers to essentially a chemical in the body that's almost selectively produced by cancer cells, and it's not present in healthy cells. And so there's a lot of interest in trying to study these things, and D2HG happens to be one of them. And the fact that it's present is the major reason that drives proliferation of these cancer cells. So let's see. What, do I just hit the arrow here? Is that right? Oh, got it. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So like I said, D2HG is an oncometabolite, and our real interest is we know what it does in cancer cells to some degree, although there's a lot of unknowns. But the real interest is how can we measure it, can we detect it? And there's actually two sides to the story that I'll talk about on my final slide today. So the Upper Michigan Brain Tumor Center, who this collaboration is with, is focused on studying brain cancers, obviously. One specific type is adult diffuse gliomas, and there's three major types, but just to sort of emphasize the importance of this particular type of brain cancer, it occurs in 6 out of every 100,000 adults worldwide. The prognosis can vary, and so I'll talk a little bit. There's two major types. There's something called IDH mutant and IDH wild type. And the name of this you'll see right here, I don't know if I want to say it out loud, isocitrate dehydrogenase. This is what we call an enzyme. So if anyone knows what an enzyme is, essentially they make all the chemical reactions in your body go faster, all right? So this is what this particular enzyme is. I'll call it IDH from now on. But why IDH is so important is because in 2021, the World Health Organization stated that the mutational status, or we'll say the state of IDH, is the major molecular signature of adult diffuse glioma. So a surgeon or an oncologist who looks at someone with adult diffuse glioma wants to know what's going on with IDH first, okay? And so like I said, the prognosis can vary depending on the grade of the brain cancer. So low-grade gliomas, which are slower growing and less aggressive, have a 5-year survival rate that can exceed 80%, which is quite good. For higher grade gliomas, the survival rate is less than 5% for 5-year survival. And so we don't have to spell out all these terms, but there's two different types of IDH. You can have the normal IDH, which is IDH wild type, and individuals with this type of brain cancer are automatically classified as having glioblastoma, which is a grade 4 cancer, high grade cancer, very low survival rate. The ones that we're interested in are actually the mutant forms of this enzyme. So just like a different form of the enzyme that we would not expect. There's two types, astrocytoma and oligodendrogliomas, okay? And these can be low grade or high grade. So sorry if that's too much, but essentially we're focused on this mutant enzyme and its role in adult diffuse gliomas. And so like I said, we're focused on IDH. It's what we call a central enzyme in our bodies that makes all reactions go faster. This diagram here actually shows way more than I think is necessary. And even the text is a little bit small, so I don't know that I'll point at it too much, but essentially, you need this enzyme, everyone needs this enzyme in every cell of their body to perform a particular chemical reaction. But what happens in some individuals is that when their cells divide, a mutation pops up in this enzyme, and it turns what I call this superhero enzyme, which is normally great, into the villain, okay? So it starts catalyzing or producing a molecule that's an oncometabolite, and this is D2HG, okay? So the idea here is that individuals with IDH mutant gliomas start producing D2HG, and I won't even say the name of that. We'll just call it D2HG. And so there's a lot of interest in understanding what this does. Essentially, like I said, this shouldn't be present in your cells, and it is. And what it does is it fights with other molecules over the roles of these particular molecules. And so that's what this diagram demonstrates, is it causes issues with DNA replication and things like methylation, essentially causes cancer, and you get upregulation of things that you don't want and downregulation of things that you do want. And then this is an image here showing a brain of someone who is diagnosed with a grade 2 astrocytoma, and you can see the brain tumor and the part where it's lighting up is showing you where D2HG is present, right? So at this point, if the only part you understand is that D2HG is bad, that's good. That's the important part here. So so we want to measure this thing, right? Because it's a proxy for folks that have this type of cancer, and so there's a lot of challenges though. And surgeons will encounter these challenges. So for instance, if a surgeon is trying to determine whether someone is IDH wild type or mutant, they have to do invasive surgery and actually get tissue from the brain. So they have to do brain surgery. Then they have to send it out to another lab in order to do some type of assay that can detect that. It takes a lot of time, it's very expensive, and it's invasive. The other thing is when a surgeon's performing surgery, when they're doing the tissue resection, sometimes they don't know when to stop, right? So it'd be useful to know what the margins are. At what point are you no longer within the tumor and it's no longer IDH mutant? Another challenge is early detection. How can you detect these brain cancers early? A lot of folks will come in with a headache or neck pain and be diagnosed with brain cancer, right? So early detection's an issue. So it'd be useful if we could pee in a cup, right, when we go to the doctor for a urine test or get a blood sample and say, potentially this is something we need to look at. And then also being able to monitor patients that have this cancer that are undergoing therapy would be useful if you didn't have to do brain imaging every time. And so the current standard of treatment for folks with at least with the IDH mutant cancers are surgery, aggressive surgery, followed by chemotherapy and radiation. Although now there's personalized medicine coming out, which is really popular, that specifically targets the mutant form of the enzyme. So it's more of a targeted therapy, and that's gaining traction. So D2HD is bad, and we want to be able to measure it, and maybe this can help surgeons and oncologists out. So when I approached Dean Rob Wynn, who's the head of the Upper Michigan Brain Tumor Center about 4 years ago now, about this idea that I can build a fluorescent biosensor for this thing. And I don't think they believed me at the time. And then a year later, we were actually able to do this. We built a biosensor. So this is what the biosensor looks like. Essentially, you see some blue and yellow here. Those are what we call fluorescent proteins. And so when this sensor encounters D2HG, it essentially glows. All right, so that's really the premise of this thing is when it meets D2HG, it lights up. So it's a sensor, right? It can detect it. So this is the sensor that we made, and there's some data here showing that essentially I have a lot of text on here, but I'll just boil it down to a couple things. The sensor is cheap, it's easy to use, and technically not very challenging. I already said cheap. So there's a lot of strengths to this sensor. It doesn't really require any advanced instrumentation. You just need something that's able to collect light, right? Because it glows. Our sensor is actually selective for D2HG versus all the other techniques. Really what I found is all the other techniques that are currently able to measure this oncometabolite, and I won't go into the names of these, it can't distinguish it from other molecules very well, which seems like an issue, right? So I said they cannot resolve D2HG from L2HG. Those are two very similar molecules, except L2HG is present in healthy cells. So you really need it to be able to tell the difference between them. Our sensor can do it. We found that others really cannot here. It's versatile, it's optimizable, so like our labs are constantly finding new ways to optimize this thing, create new versions of it. And most importantly, probably, it's a project that's approachable by undergraduate students, which was largely our population at NMU, and so I can have undergraduate students work on this and learn a lot and get publications and be a part of grants and things like that. So we've built this sensor and we've validated it. A lot of this work was done by Christian Choate, who's now, who graduated from the UMBDC. And so this is my final slide right here, is saying there's two sides to this coin, okay? So what can we do with this fluorescent tool that glows when it sees D2HG? I'm a basic scientist, so I'm a biochemist. So I'm more interested in learning what is it doing in your cell? Like where is it? Is it moving around? Are the levels changing? And so I said here, we can illuminate the subcellular distribution and dynamics of D2HG. So the picture that you're looking at right here is the nucleus of a cell. Everyone's heard of the nucleus probably, right? So this is where your DNA is housed. We can target the center to the nucleus where it's exerting a lot of its bad effects. And we can measure D2HG specifically in the nucleus, which is interesting. We can also target it to other parts of the cell, like the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of your cell. We can target it anywhere, and I can tell you how much there is and what it's doing and if the levels are changing. And really the important thing here is that you can see from my future direction at the bottom, what we want to do is, I mentioned how IDH mutants produce this thing. Well, there's a bunch of different kinds of IDH mutants, and so we're interested in understanding how different IDH mutants shape D2HG in cells. So does one mutant make more than the other, and is that mutant less aggressive because of that, right? So that might be useful to physicians as well. And then the other part, perhaps the more interesting part, is the fact that we can actually detect D2HG in pee, in blood, and even in brain tumor samples. So this data right here, if you can see, this is a bar graph, and there's 20 samples. And what you're looking at on the axis right here, it says a weird term, Fret ratio, but really it means how much D2HG is there. And you'll see there's a dotted red line, and you'll see that there's 5 bars that are above that dotted red line, right? And so what that means is that those 5 samples have elevated levels of D2HG. And when you go back and look at sort of like we did this blindly, when you go back and look at where these samples came from, they all came from IDH mutant tumors. And so the sensor can actually tell with 100% accuracy, according to an N of 20, whether that particular tissue should produce D2HG. And then the other 15 samples are IDH wild type, which should not. So the sensor can discriminate perfectly. And so this is what we've done. We've also shown that we can spike D2HG into biological fluids, artificial cerebral spinal fluid. We can detect it in there. And so what we're planning to do is we have sort of a pending grant on this right now, but with the state of the NIH, we don't really know what's happening. And so what we want to do is measure D2HG levels in the urine and the serum of patients who have been diagnosed with these IDH mutant cancers, and being able to follow those patients as they undergo therapy, right? So the idea would be that this particular individual undergoes surgery. We know that they have an IDH mutant cancer. They start, going through these targeted therapies, and then they, pee in a cup. I said pee in a cup way too many times during this talk, but they pee in a cup, once a week. And I'm not a physician, so that's my best guess. And we monitor the levels of D2HG in their urine, and sort of, if we have a baseline, and hopefully what we see is a drop in those levels and not an increase. And so this would be a non-invasive approach as a diagnostic, and so the potential for this thing is limitless in the sense that we want it to be used as a liquid biopsy, right? You go in for a blood panel, you go in for a urine test or whatever, and you can measure this thing. So those are the 2 sides of this project, and my lab, this is one of several projects, but it's probably the major project right now that we've contributed to, and just we have great undergraduates and graduate students that have contributed to this work in collaboration with the UMBTC. So. And that's actually all I have, so thanks for your attention. I'll take any questions. Thanks.
I actually have a quick question. I understand that you're using the body fluids right now, but at some point, would it ever be able to be put into your veins to light up the cells in the brain? Then you could actually measure them.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I've thought of that before. I don't know in terms of the feasibility. Putting it into the body would be. I don't know how to envision it. I haven't thought that far ahead. Matt Jennings from the UMBTC is kind of my counterpart. That his vision's the translational stuff. But so far, what we've thought of is like, if you're able, it's a lot. I feel like it's a lot easier, and the approval might be easier even if you, as opposed to putting it into someone. There would be less approvals required than to take a tissue from someone and like a tumor tissue, a fluid sample, because we have to make this sensor. This is bizarre, but in order to make large quantities of this sensor, we have to put it into bacteria first, and then we take it out of the bacteria. So then there's the issue of the contamination. But this is the same way that, insulin, for instance, right? Insulin now is made recombinantly, right? So the pharmaceutical companies have bacteria make insulin, and somehow we're able to inject that into humans. So I think it's certainly possible, at least in an animal model at first, right? But that would be awesome if, like, a surgeon were doing brain surgery, And as he's doing the surgery, he can see the margins. I mean, I don't know if that's too far-fetched, but could see the margins of where the tissue is no longer IDH mutant, and that's where you stop, because these cancers have a better prognosis if you're aggressive during surgery, but you don't want, obviously with brain surgery, you cannot be too aggressive. So, and there's no tool that can currently do like a point of detection like this can. So yes, I want it. I want that.
Yeah, it would be interesting, but yeah, I guess then you would have to know how the body will metabolize it too. It would
Right.
be hard on the
Well,
liver.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's possible. I don't know.
All right. So I was just wondering, what do you envision, if this went, broadly used in medical setting? Are you thinking like literally in doctor's offices, everyone could have one and just run a thing, or is it at hospitals? Is it adjacent to
Right.
a surgery? Like, what would that look like?
I want all the things with it. Like I've talked with Matt about it, and probably it wouldn't ever become a part of, say, like your standard blood panel. Like when you go into the doc, I don't think that. I mean, it's very cheap. Like we calculated it out. To do one assay is less than $1, so it's like pennies to do an assay. But I still don't think it would make sense to like if a pharmaceutical company ever got it, they're just gonna, unfortunately, they probably just jack the price up. So it's like, but like I think if someone who's actively undergoing therapy, for instance, it would. My hope is that it would just become a part of a standard of care. This tool or something like it, right, where they're able to monitor them. But like for us, the doctor could do it in his office. Like the instrumentation's not complex, but nowadays you have to do like analytical chemistry to detect it. And that takes someone who's really skilled, takes really expensive equipment, things like that. I mean, but the dream, I think, and I think the goal of the UMPTC originally was they wanted to have something that could help a surgeon guide their surgery. At least that was one of the guiding principles. So I envision it also potentially could be used in an operating room where the surgeon takes a piece of tissue off. Okay, let's see if it's got any. Oh, it does. Okay, let's go a little further. Okay, we're good. It doesn't have any more. I mean, I can almost envision both. So, and we've thought about that. We have a provisional patent right now that we're pursuing the full patent on it, just because I know if I go back a couple slides, sorry, like the company that I mentioned, this drug down here, this vorasidenib, is a recently FDA-approved medication, and we know for a fact that the company that developed that likes this thing, right? So we're trying to protect it.
All right, I think we're going to have to move into the next
want a mic, Lisa?
segment.
Okay,
We
okay.
have a burning question up there, it looks like. Did we?
Lisa's just going to ask me while I'm sitting up here, I think.
Okay, all right. Lisa, I think you can move us into the next space.
Okay. 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 So could it be generalizable for other types? I think it could, because we're focused on glioma, but they found that breast cancer, certain types of leukemia, prostate cancer also produce D2HG. And so like I think it's not just limited to glioma, that's all we've shown so far. And then they've also found that other molecules besides D2HG can act as oncometabolites. So I'm thinking, well, what if I developed a sensor for those? So, and then just created a company that just makes sensors for oncometabolites. So I've thought about those things, but I think, yeah, for sure, yeah. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pratt. Thank you to all of our researchers and panelists. And now I would like to invite Dr. Rick Mengen to the podium, actually to a chair, as the moderator for panel discussion. And I could not get that mic to work, but could be user error.
So this one doesn't work? All right. So, I guess I have to use the podium. All right. Oh, good. All right, so I'm, as Dean Eckert mentioned, I'm Rick Mengen. I'm an associate professor in physics here. I'm also an active scholar. And given the time constraints, we're going to go through maybe one or two questions for each panelist, just kind of little bit open-ended, but share about it'll be about like your experience or what's driving you and that kind of stuff. So, we'll pick one a little bit randomly here. I'd like each of you to briefly share about a big obstacle or challenge in your research career and how you navigated it. We'll start with Adam, just because you're on the end.
Big challenge in my career. That's actually, I probably could have used some more time to think about that one. Yeah, I don't know. I'll pass.
So you ask a big obstacle as a researcher, right? In Northern, we don't have any obstacle because we have the best union president, Meg, and we have Lisa, we have good support, we have good president.
The executive orders right now are probably my biggest thing, and the freeze on NIH funding. I was about to start working on a grant proposal, but yeah, and I think too also for me, outside of that, the notion of my research being quote unquote me search as a queer non-binary scholar, like I have a personal stake in the work that I do, and so deciding whether or not to focus on that and how seriously it's taken. Some people don't take it seriously, but I kind of decided the advantage of having an MSW, which is our practice degree in social work, is if research doesn't work out, I can go back to practice. So I have a fallback option.
I think from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges has been some of the questions that I'm asking are disruptive to the care industry for our population, for dancers specifically. And I don't think anybody goes into medicine or physical therapy or athletic training or anything purposely trying to ignore a population, certainly. But I think, we've really had to learn how to be very self-advocating for what we do. And so some of these questions, I think, have been a bit challenging for some people to hear, that it has felt dismissive. And so I think we're trying to not make people feel badly, but to help them understand that we do need them to maybe broaden their knowledge base a little bit to include what it is that we do and how that we do that. Because going into physical therapy and just hearing, oh my God, you're so flexible is like not a helpful comment, or you're more flexible than the average human, doesn't help when that is what we need to do in order to do our job, so.
I'll share this one next time. Let me think here. So I could get really detailed and say, like, publishing that paper was really challenging, or I mean, everyone like grad school getting your PhD is challenging, but I think the challenges aren't unique to. I mean, I think as academics we're pretty lucky. We can do what we do, and we get, in my lab I can research whatever I want. I get to teach undergraduate students and interact with them. But the challenges aren't unique in that, in graduate school you're just trying to, do your best and get that promotion. So then trying to get a postdoc, and God, it's challenging to get a faculty position, right? I mean, that was a challenge. I think everyone who gets a faculty position says that it's a lot of it's luck, right? Because there's so few positions and so many applicants. So I think, but those challenges of trying to climb the ladder aren't unique. But that's certainly, I'd say that's balancing family and academia. But that's not unique to us. That's for everyone. So I think the challenges aren't. I love what I do, and the challenges are just part of it, and that's something we all have to. Everyone deals with, regardless if they're in academia or not. So.
All right, thank you. Let's switch to reflecting on a little bit and talk about how mentorship, whether as a mentor or mentee, has shaped your career, or has contributed to, or continues to shape your career.
I can start that. Oh, it's everything. Yeah, I mean, mentorship in this field is very much, in all the learning scholarship is very much like an apprentice mentor model. And the quality of the mentor you get is everything. And it's not just their talent and ability to do what they do and to learn from them. Do they actually care about you? Because there are a lot of very famous people that you go to grad school and you want to meet, you go with the rock star in your field and they're going to make a big career for you. And it turns out they're never around. They're traveling all over the world. They never spend time with you. They don't bother to teach you. And so you got the real famous person who doesn't. So when I advise students, I'm like, hey, you got to try to find someone who's actually going to care and invest with you. And maybe that's not the rock star. Maybe that's somebody who's still pretty well accomplished, but they're going to meet with you weekly, and they're going to be guiding you on all the things that really set you up. And then later on in life, you're going to need this person after you get your degree. They're still going to be mentoring you maybe on career questions, maybe on letters of recommendation. I have, this past December, it's been 20 years since I got my doctorate degree. If I ever needed a letter, I might still contact my doctorate advisor and ask for a letter. And so you want that. So you want somebody who's still going to be part of your life throughout. So that's incredible. And you try to, hopefully they modeled good mentorship so when you have your own students, you also have that mindset. Like the quality of the interactions you have is very important. And to know that your investment of time is not just for that short period of time they're here, it goes on and on and on. I now have former students who are professors now in academia. They call me for questions about how do I deal with my department chair, or how do I make a convincing evaluation, or how do I get this equipment? So it never ends. And so as a mentor, you want to be there. It's a lifetime commitment, and it's a very rewarding experience. You get to spend the rest of your life and your career still being part of these individuals' lives. So I think that mentorship is just, it's really a relationship, and you, just like all relationships, you want to have good quality and good investment in people.
Yeah, I'm sure all of us agree with that. Good mentorship is so important. So I would like to answer a little bit differently. So I think given the significance of mentorship, one thing I think Noldon can do better would be help faculty to have a more literally effective and formal mentorship with our students, whether they are graduate students or just undergraduate students. So it is not just about funding issue, but currently I believe that we can do better in terms of mentorship specifically. So it could be various program like undergraduate student fellowship like that, but also I think we can do better to help us, help faculty members to provide a more effective and a more long-lasting, more high-impact practice of mentorship.
Yeah, mentorship's been huge for me. My first year of my PhD program, I was randomly assigned to someone as a research assistant, and it was amazing, and we really hit it off, and she stayed connected to me, and then I worked for her again off and on, and she invited me to guest lecture in her classroom, and then she ended up being the chair of my dissertation committee after a huge reshuffle of members on my committee multiple times. But even now, she reaches out to me, and in a fellowship that I was involved with, some of our faculty in that fellowship were saying, instead, more than a mentor, if you can find a sponsor. So unlike a mentor, a sponsor takes it a step further and champions you. And I've had that. She, connects me to people. She just emailed me a research opportunity that she thought I might be interested in, and it's kind of really pushing me to do things, not just being there when I have questions, but it's a two-way relationship, and that's been really helpful.
I think, in our world, in the arts, I'll shift gears a little bit out of dance science and medicine and go back into the arts. Our world of mentorship can look really interesting because most of what we do happens collaboratively. So mentorship happens amongst my colleagues every day, most of whom are sitting in this room working this event, some of whom are sitting here getting to enjoy this event. Hi, Lex. And I have to say, in terms of mentorship, all of them have been mentors for me. You know, I am a dancer, and I kind of grew up in that bubble, and I had wonderful mentors, so much so that I followed one of them from NYU to Columbia, my program director who jumped ship from one school to another. But from the ones who are here in this room who have different specialties within our art form, I've learned so much from them because we have to do everything together. I don't get to do what I do without all of this amazing technology that's over our head, and we don't get to put on shows without the costumes and the scenic designs and the sound design right here. So there's a lot of mentorship that happens in that, and I think in our department, we're really lucky because we do not have a graduate program in performance, that our undergraduates get all of the design opportunities then, so they get inherent mentorship out of the gate. So the things that a lot of universities don't get until the graduate level, the same with like the Brain Tumor Research Center here. We have undergraduates that are getting to do amazing research, which gives you that mentorship opportunity. Same with a lot of the psychology labs and the Bayer Center and whatnot, and all the work that's happening here. Like, mentorship happens within the research world, and research just looks a little bit different in our world. It's every production, all 14 of them, that you see in our department, and that's embedded in what we do.
Those are some great answers. I don't know if I can, I was thinking about all the ways I want to answer this. I mean, I've had some great mentors along the way, because, you know, as a researcher, I did undergraduate research, and I had a really, really great undergraduate research mentor at Michigan State, who, like, after all these, I mean, it's been 15 years, and like last year on LinkedIn, she messaged me out of nowhere, I haven't talked in some time, and saying how proud of me she was. I was like, oh my, you know what I mean? I haven't thought it's, yeah, I know. It's like, and I think about her all the time. It's like, I wouldn't have gotten into research without her. And then, you know, certainly graduate school, they all offer different perspectives, and then you try to sort of embolden that. And, you know, as a mentor now, you try to have that, you know, those same characteristics and help these students grow. And I, you know, I think you're learning constantly, because I had no idea what I was doing when I got started, but you become invested in these students, and I could tell you every one of their names that's worked in my lab, and, you know, what they're doing now, because I just try to stay connected, and if they ever need a letter or, you know, whatever. And even now at NMU, I mean, it's, even as a faculty member, there's mentors. I'm gonna call Adam out. I mean, Adam is the head of psychology, and I'm an assistant professor in chemistry. And maybe the second year, Adam kind of, you know, took me under his wing, invited me over to watch the Lions. We helped, you know, we wrote a grant together. You know, so even at NMU, you got people like that. Relationship normally doesn't happen, you know, and it's just like, so that's the type of, you know, so Adam, I might need a letter at, you know, at some point from, you know, but you know, that's awesome. So the mentorship, like, never ends, even though you're still, you know, even though you're currently mentoring other, you know, other folks younger than you. So, yeah.
All right, thank you all. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, so we'll do 2 more. Let's take a look, or think about how your research focus has shifted over time.
Ooh, I could jump. That's been challenging, because it's really hard. Well, I think probably in any field, but I can speak for the sciences, they shift a whole new research. I did this recently. I was on my first several years here, I was really focused, I'll save all the technical details, but I was really focused on a particular line of research, but for helping with mental illness, but it didn't seem to really be going anywhere. And it started getting to where it was, I still had research I could publish. So it was probably more like an academic question, but I didn't want to do work that maybe could at least contribute to future treatments in some way. So I completely shifted gears. This is where Dr. Pratt comes in, to a whole new mechanism that I really knew almost nothing about. I invested a lot of time trying to learn, is there anything here of any potential whatever. So I had to learn, entirely new theories and new cellular systems and all this kind of stuff. And And that was kind of like, and then you had the sunk cost, like, did I invest all this time for something that won't go anywhere? So that was challenging. It's actually been really paying off, and Dr. Pratt and I have been collaborating on some really interesting research where I can do the behavioral stuff and you can do the cellular stuff, and we can kind of cross-train students, which has really been interesting. So it's been very rewarding, but it's challenging trying to shift gears, especially as you get later in your career, trying to learn new things. So yeah, it's a good question.
Thank you. So again, if you just came in, I'm Dr. Yu, and then Dr. Yu's research lies between the nexus between energy, water, and health. And the reason I wanted to mention that energy, water, health, seems like very different, but I wanted to mention about the incrementalism. So incrementalism is the concept we are dealing with in our public administration course, but it also applies to my shifting throughout the research. For example, I work for the energy industry, but one of the projects I did in my old company was hydropower, so that it was an energy project. But thanks to that opportunity, I got to know more about water. And then I went to University of Michigan, I went to University of Colorado, and then I was able to get a postdoctoral fellowship at the Colorado School of Mines, which is similar to Michigan Tech, a typical Aaron STEM school. And then, so it was very rare to them hire political scientist as a postdoctoral fellow in the hydrologic science and engineering program. So I think when students think about the shift, career shift, and then like this guy, like great guy can have a new mechanism, but like me, the baby professor, cannot have that new mechanism. But still, as a baby professor, we can achieve it incrementally, just step by step. We can shift our focus, and we can expand our research agendas.
My focus hasn't really shifted much yet because I'm so early in my career. The big thing has been actually focusing because I'm interested in so much. So I've had to narrow my focus and limit my interests and say, that's for later, that's for later.
I'm going to introduce you to a phrase that my good friend Sheethel has coined, which is "and not or." And that is unfortunately, or fortunately, where my research has gone. So I'm conducting my dissertation research, and that has been kind of a through line for me since my undergraduate days here, which turned into then me being in the School of Education because I decided teaching dance was more important than medicine, and now I've circled back. But also, leadership has always been an important area of study for me. So I'm also on a leadership research team through our education, or through our research institute in my program at Columbia, which is funded by the Arnhold family. So we just published our first article. So I am still researching leadership in dance and dance education. And then as soon as I wrap up this dissertation, I'll get to be able to come back to choreographing shows here, which is a whole other area of research. So as we put together every show that we do here, there's a boatload of research that has to go into putting that together. So and not or.
Trying to think how to phrase this. I mean, you always have a plan, right? Like when I was coming out of my postdoc and I was gonna start my first year at NMU, it's like, this is what I'm gonna do. And I started in the fall of 2020. It was sort of a depressing time to start, and not a lot of people were around, and I'm doing research in my lab by myself, and I'm like, well, this is not working. What am I gonna do? I'm like, I'm doomed. I'm not gonna get tenure, there's no way. And so you work on that project, but then these opportunities present themselves, the project with the UMBTC. It's like, I never thought I was gonna work on brain cancer, but you kind of leverage that institute, and actually it started with an idea from that whole project. The sensor started from a student that wanted to honorize my class 4 years ago, it was all hypothetical. It was like, what if we built this sensor, you know? And I was like, and then like a week later, I'm like, what if we built that? What if we did that, you know? And then the rest is history. Now, you know, and the same thing with Adam. It's like we were talking at the Pi Hour at the end of the semester, you know, like we have Pi. Yeah, we were having Pi, and that's where that all started, was on this idea of the sigma-1 receptor and like my research is not at all like my projects are not at all related to what I started with. But then the good thing about NMU too is, you know, you have these undergraduate students come in, like we have the medicinal plant chemistry program, and I'm like, I know zero about plants, but it's like, let's come up with a project, you know, you can come up with a project for that particular student. And so yeah, you see the research my lab does now, and it's insane, doing too much and completely unrelated to one another, and I don't have time to to focus on any one thing. But yeah, so it's scattered.
All right, thank you all. We've got 8 minutes left, so we're going to go through this one a little bit quickly. So we'll close this out with something to think about, which is where did I write this down? Learning to read is something on my list. If you could give advice to your past self when you were starting out, what would it be?
Yeah, there's always a risk when you're starting out to be overambitious and to try to do everything everywhere, you know, all at once. Right? so just pick a couple of things and try to get really focused on that idea. You can make more progress that way and try and do everything. You know, so.
Yeah, I think getting blessing from the administrators, I think would be one thing I'm a little bit missing, that because without the blessing from the administrator, even though we have awesome Lisa and then we have blessed the leadership team, but before embarking on the new project, I think that would be more effective for me.
I would have taken more stats classes.
I'm just gonna go with I don't have any advice, just because that's like the journey, right? It's like you never, like I grew up in downstate Michigan in Flint, and I never envisioned I'd end up at NMU, but I'm glad I did. It's just like it's just the journey you look back on. It's so weird. It's just like this, right? It's just like I don't have, because that wouldn't have happened if I would have known now what I know then. So I don't have any. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all. I think it's Lisa here to close us out.
Thanks to everyone for being here today, and thank you so much to the researchers and to Dr. Mengen. You are also a researcher, but for serving as moderator. We really appreciate the time that you spent here today. I have copious notes. I'm sure other people do as well, and many ideas that you've helped me to think about. So we really appreciate it. And this is such a pleasure just to have this space and time to have these kinds of conversations. So now what do we do? I'm thinking, okay, how do we bring everyone together, find the money, and do something with mentorship, do something with offering that advice, reflecting back on a long career, making those kinds of changes to a research trajectory. You know, how do we help? How do we make it happen? So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Everyone, big hand. And they're available for discussion on the way out. I'm volunteering you to answer more questions informally. And hopefully we'll be seeing you at some of the other events. Today we have the 3-minute thesis event that's coming up at 1 o'clock, right? 1 o'clock. And the student scholarship summit too. Don't forget to get your raffle tickets, put them in the basket, and I also want to extend a very, very heartfelt thank you to the team in the back who are giving us lighting, who are giving us sound, making this microphone work, even for someone who engages in user error with things like this all the time. So thank you to everyone. Really appreciate it.
May I get a picture of you all really quick? Can I just get one picture real quick?